So welcome everybody. Kia ora tatou, no mai, haere mai. Ko ana toko ingoa, tō tamaki makoto aho. Kei Cancer Society aho e mahi ana. Tēnā koutou katoa. So I am based in Auckland at Domain Lodge in the psychology service. So welcome from wherever around Aotearoa you are joining us today. And fellow commiserations to anybody else who is in Auckland joining us. Hopefully it won't be too much longer before we have a little bit more freedom. So as Stanley said, we will be recording this talk, but it's only my face that gets recorded, okay? Towards the end, when we might do some sort of Q&As or some discussions, then we will stop the recording at that point. So nobody's voices or faces will be in this. But if you are hearing some information from others, just respect that that information is confidential and to keep that to yourselves if you can. Please keep your microphones on mute if you can, but if you have any technical troubles, just send Stanley a chat message and he'll try to support you. Okay, so I will jump into today's talk, which is designed with cancer supporters in mind. So this is a photo that some of you may recognize. It's the pinnacles and coromandel. So I have been up there a few times and always with somebody else to keep me company. And this is a little bit what cancer is like. It's very difficult to go through by yourself. And you will hear about how important it is that people get support. Quite rightly so. Good social support predicts people cope well with cancer. It's one of the biggest factors. But we do hear less about how important it is that supporters have their own support crew. So this is what the talk is about today. So mainly I will be kind of talking through today about who is a supporter, how does cancer affect supporters, what's their experience like, how does it differ to people with cancer, the importance of stress and managing early warning signs of burnout, and some other communication tools around talking to people and talking with your loved one. At the end, we will finish on a nice practical technique around relaxation. So that's always something really nice to take away at the end. And we will have a short break throughout. So we will go through for about an hour, lots of information, but as I said, don't feel like you've got to remember it all. We do have a written handout which covers the main points. Okay. So in terms of who is a supporter, it's anybody affected by the person with cancer, anybody that's affected by the cancer. So it can be obviously sort of the main support person. It might be a partner or a very close family member, a parent or a child. And then you've got the wider family, friends, colleagues at work, anybody who you come into contact in the community has the potential to be a supporter. So it's a little bit like the layers of an onion. We have those sort of small rings around us, and then we have those wider support systems as well. Even pets, we mustn't forget the important role that our pets play as supporters as well. So we do know those primary caregivers, usually it is partners, parents, children, they do take on a huge burden. And I always encourage people, if you are a supporter, try to not see yourself as this sort of the main one. Try and see that this idea is to spread it out around as many people as possible so they can take on other things as well. So we'll talk a lot more about that as we go. So this is a slide I actually use in some of the other talks. It talks about some of those initial challenges when someone's diagnosed, and this is relevant for patients with cancer, but also anybody around them will also get hit with these effects. So current living, plans, they just get completely shelved. Everything sort of just goes up in the air or it's on hold. Let's also remember the context that we're in, particularly in Tamaki Makaurau, where everything's just gone on hold. So COVID, I absolutely acknowledge, is going to add a double whammy of life feeling like it's just stopped. That will affect supporters, and those plans and those dreams that people have, the frustration of the situation that cancer puts people in. And also, you know, difficulty understanding what's going on. Typically when people are diagnosed, there's high levels of distress, and it can be quite hard to process information when people are really heightened in their emotions. Just a reminder, if everybody could put their microphones on mute, that would be awesome. Thank you. So the sadness, the loss, the grief, that's going to affect both supporters and patients. But I guess what supporters are going through is slightly different to what patients are going through, because they will be experiencing something called anticipatory grief. So that is something that can start at diagnosis. And it typically refers to the imagined loss of that person, or the meaning of that loss of that person. So that can be a slightly different experience to the person with cancer, who might be focusing on loss of time. It can be a very, very distressing time for supporters around that anticipatory grief. So that is something that we often find with supporting people around, and people can be very much kind of caught up in the future and how will I cope, and what's life going to be like further down the track for me, what will I need to cope with. Whereas the person with cancer can be more focused on leaving things tidy and leaving everybody else okay, and making plans for that. Numbness, again, we sometimes see kind of almost a lack of emotion. Some people will sort of almost feel quite flat, because our brains can do this. If everything's all too much and it's overwhelming, it's a bit of a psychological mechanism to sort of shut down. And so some people will not feel anything. And that's quite normal sometimes as well. Communication can be a real challenge with either with the person that you're caring for, or with wider family or friends or community. You know, how do we tell others, and when and how much do we tell them, and how do we even organize the communication? That can be a challenge in itself. And then change in roles, of course, is a big challenge for supporters, because if you look to that person that you're caring for as the strong one, or the one that's sort of been the glue of the family, or the person that's sort of been there to the rock, or the one that everybody leans on for support, and suddenly those roles are shifted, it's very destabilizing for all of those people around them. Or even just that change in role from husband to nurse, or friend to carer, it can really change dynamics and feel really uncomfortable being put into a role that you didn't expect to come along in life. Okay, so again, this is just a few things that typically affect both people with cancer and supporters, but I think it's really recognizing that often the same challenges are being faced there by supporters as well. These are some common thoughts. So I wish I could do something to make him or her better. That sense of helplessness is quite overwhelming for a lot of supporters. That feeling of, I can't fix this. I don't really know. I don't know what they need. How can I be a good supporter? I don't know what to say. I don't know the right thing to do. There's no kind of manual, or there's no preparation for this role that you've been put in. So it can be really, really kind of apprehensive time. as well as the feeling of, I just want things to go back to normal. I don't like the fact that cancer's come in and kind of thrown life up in the air. That real normal feeling of anger and frustration at the situation is okay. Or that feeling life has become all about cancer. It's dominating my headspace. It's become my career. And just that frustration of other things that you value doing or things that are important to you seem to feel a bit shelved. Fear is a big one, of course, scared about the future and what that might look like. Or it's all about her, it's all about him, what about me? So supporters can often feel like, you know, your nurses, your medical team, doctors will always ask the patient, how are you doing? How are you feeling? But sometimes supporters might feel like nobody really asked how I am and how it's all affecting me. So this talk is about recognizing and acknowledging that the impacts are significant on supporters as well. It is a big challenge and it's a long bit of a marathon slog because cancer isn't a short-term stressor. It goes on for long periods of time. So these again are just common thoughts people will experience, and they're all very, very normal. We see these all the time. Again, a lot of people will say, you know, I'm feeling this way, or I'm having these thoughts. Is this normal? I think recognize that it can be really upsetting to see someone you love unwell and in pain and not being able to fix it, particularly if you see yourself as someone who might be a bit of a fixer or someone who's generally quite practical and solution offering. Sometimes the best way to support someone is by doing nothing but kind of just listening or being just present with them without offering anything to make them feel better. And I'll talk a bit more about the importance of not feeling like you have to make that person feel happier or better or more upbeat, because that's a lot of pressure on you. But that feeling of that roller coaster being kind of out of control, feeling like you're not quite sure what's around the corner next, and the uncertainty of it causes a lot of anxiety for people. And those emotions can be overwhelming as well. So we generally know that feeling distressed and feeling that kind of very up and down experience throughout the cancer journey is very normal with cancer. Quite different from a kind of a depression picture, which is kind of when someone's mood really doesn't change. It goes down and then it stays very low and flat, and there's not much variation in that. Whereas the cancer experience for many can be quite sort of, it's all the feelings. It's not just sort of an absence of feelings, it's all of the feelings. So often, you know, as a supporter, you might be feeling hopeful, but also very scared. You might be feeling gratitude and appreciation, but there's a lot of grief. You're holding all of those feelings simultaneously. And so it's really just that roller coaster of ups and downs. But typically, a lot of people are still able to access feelings of meaning and joy and purpose in amongst those more painful feelings. But I will say that, you know, there is no such kind of typical response. Everybody's very, very different in how they react to cancer. And I would say, as a supporter, if you feel like the distress is prolonged, you're crying for really long periods of time in the day, for more days, more than half of the days of the week, that's a really good indicator that you might need some support from a professional. And I think about 30–35% of the referrals to our service are supporters. So we do see many, many of them, and often encourage that. It can be really helpful. Okay. So coping with big, scary emotions, it's okay to show them. There can be this real feeling of, I've got to protect the person I love. I don't want them to see I'm upset. That's from a place of love, of course. It can sometimes be from a place of maybe wanting to seem strong, not wanting to show vulnerability, depending on what you learned about showing emotion as a child. But I would say that sometimes if there is too much protection going on and you're almost sort of not allowing the person that you're caring for to see any of those feelings, they can feel quite disconnected from you. So there can be sometimes this disconnection that happens, particularly between partners, when both of them are protecting each other and not sharing or showing feelings. And what we need is connection. What most cancer patients say they need is a feeling of connection and a feeling that they can be open with the people that are looking after them, and vice versa. So connection, that vulnerability with sharing some of your feelings helps connection. It helps the support network stay strong. But it can be useful to talk to someone professional or someone else that you trust if you feel like you don't want to overwhelm or burden the person with cancer, or if you feel like they're not in a place for you to talk really openly about certain topics like end stages, if that can often be something that people aren't ready for. So it is about using the professional support as well. But it is also about not feeling that pressure to be positive all the time and stay strong and hiding those tears for, you know, your car ride or the shower. A lot of supporters do feel and put a lot of pressure on themselves to hide their feelings, but feelings are not a bad thing in themselves. It's about recognizing they're normal and allowing them to have some space. Okay. Yeah. And so a little bit of the positivity thing, I think some people can find it very helpful to be positive. But what I would say is don't feel like you have to be that way 24/7. And I think if you're feeling positive, of course, that's great. But if you're having a day where you really don't feel, you're kind of feeling a bit sad or feeling a bit scared, don't feel like you have to be positive all the time. That's the main thing around that. So change in roles. The other thing that we might find when someone in our life is diagnosed with cancer is that there is those changes in roles. So rather than being partner, parent, sibling, friend, we might become their kind of nurse and their caregiver. Whilst it's our natural instinct to want to protect and care for our loved ones, it can also be a real challenge to, particularly for supporters around who am I? What's my identity? I feel like I'm losing parts of me, the parts of me that aren't just about caring. And it can, over the long term, have an impact on those dynamics of the relationship. So good to be aware of. And I think make time to still be a couple, or make time if you are, you are, say, in a mother-daughter relationship and you're caring for your mother, allow your mother to still be in her role as a mother, because that will be important to her. So it's allowing each other to still take on those old roles as well and do things which allow them to still step into their role. So separating that out from time to time. And I think sometimes it does link into this idea of families being too helpful. So that can sometimes be amazing and comes from a place of care and love. But sometimes it means that the person with cancer loses independence, or they lose that feeling of empowerment to get up and make their own cup of tea. It's remembering that actually we want them to retain as much independence as possible. So we're doing as little nursing or caring as possible. So it's always navigating with communication. Hey, what is it that you still really want to do for yourself? What's important for you to do? Because families can be great, but sometimes too great at jumping up and saying, I'll make you the tea, or I'll do your dinner. And that person might actually want to hold on to that because it's important to them. Okay. So stress, a huge challenge for supporters. We know stress is a normal part of life. It comes along with events that happen like lockdowns, or even, you know, your daily traffic jam, or something goes wrong at work. These things come along in life. We can't prevent stress in life, but it can become a problem when it's prolonged. So by that, I mean that chronic stress picture that we can see quite commonly in cancer supporters. And it can very slowly creep in and become normal for people to feel kind of permanently at a higher baseline level of stress than they were before. Now, I use this kind of analogy of a fuel tank because often what we kind of see in supporters is that they can very quickly start to edge towards the empty, the flashing red light. And what can then happen is we see burnout. So that's something we really, really want to avoid, is getting kind of below the half mark. And it's recognizing individually for all of you as supporters, what are my kind of warning signs that I'm getting close to that empty red flashing light, and catching that early. So that's about being aware and mindful and noticing what's going on in my body, but it's also about having routines in place that protect you from getting to a certain point of stress. We all need recovery, and I think because cancer is a marathon journey, it's not a short-term stressor that we can kind of cope with in the short term and then recover. We need regular recovery periods, regular time out throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year. And that's how marathon runners approach this as well. You know, they regularly refuel along the way. We cannot expect ourselves to keep going without stopping, because very quickly we burn out. And that's horrible for yourselves, but importantly has a really negative impact on that person you're caring for as well. We want to prevent burnout, so it's thinking ahead. What are those early warning signs for me? So for me, I know it's about headaches and it's about irritability, and it might be a little bit about kind of not being able to sleep. But individuals are different. So for some people, it might be kind of feeling more symptoms of anxiety around racing heart or hot, or it might be fatigue. It might be not concentrating as well, or it might be just feeling more tearful. So it's really recognizing, what are my early warning signs physically, behaviorally? What do I do when I'm really stressed and it's staying at that high kind of chronic level? It's not having the opportunity to come down. Knowing what it is for you individually, and at that point taking some action to bring down the stress level. Okay. And a huge part that needs so much emphasis in this talk is about looking after yourselves. And your mind might be at this point pushing back and saying, I don't have time, or it's impossible, or there's too much to do, and all these sort of thoughts that get in the way. But it's absolutely critical, not just for you, but for the person you're supporting, to really allow yourself permission to take time out to refuel. So you will have seen the Air New Zealand sort of safety instructions, which always recommend you put on your own oxygen mask before you put on a child's. Now that seems so counterintuitive to all of us, but we're no good to anybody if we haven't got enough fuel ourselves to help others. We very quickly run out. It's the same in our profession. So psychologists really do have a very strong foundation around self-care, because we know that we're kind of useless to others we're supporting if we're only half full, or if we're kind of running on empty. We're no good to anybody. Nurses, doctors, all of you out there who are medical professionals, unfortunately, this is a bit different for you guys. There's a slightly different culture for your profession around this feeling of being invincible and keeping going, and I come second and the patients come first. But for those of you that know the change to the Hippocratic Oath a few years back, which was actually instigated by a doctor in New Zealand, in Queenstown, it now includes take care of myself too. So it's really important to remember that as a health professional, as a supporter, you need to focus on you. And it's almost see it as a competency that you need to be good at in order to be good at your job. So really thinking about, well, what is self-care? A lot of people will think about, oh, it's about having a bath, or it's about, you know, unwinding with a glass of wine or watching something funny. But it is also sometimes about saying no. It's about the tough things that we need to do, which involve difficult conversations with others. Or it might be about talking to yourselves about, oh, how much am I expecting of myself, particularly in this, those of you in lockdown at the moment. How much am I putting on my plate? Am I expecting the same amount from myself despite having a lot less resources? So saying no, also part of self-care. And saying yes to those other things that perhaps slip aside. So a lot of supporters I work with stop doing the things they know are really effective to managing stress. Most of us know what it is that we need to do, but those things kind of slip aside. So that is when we need to kind of do a little bit of a problem solving and a little bit of thinking with others around us. Who is around to help me so I can delegate some things? Can I invite the neighbor in, or can I invite a sibling in to sit with the person I'm looking after for half an hour so I get a bit of time? So this comes into that planning, but anything that I think particularly helps you switch away from being in the cancer headspace, because even just you know, attending those appointments and monitoring medication, and some of you who are supporters might feel you have to, or for medical reasons, have to be with that person 24/7, which can be really, really draining. So anything which helps you escape, helps you switch off, helps you connect with the present is going to be really restorative. So the things that are most effective are the things that involve using your body or your creative part of your brain. Really effectively switches off the worry part of your brain, which is the other side, and helps us kind of, you know, focus on the now. So cooking, painting, music, being out and about, change of scenery, all of these things are very effective at helping us get out of the cancer headspace and into that present focus, which is very helpful for refueling the tank. And then relaxation, good old sort of formal relaxation techniques. So some of you who use meditation, mindfulness, any guided visualizations can be really, really helpful as well. Sometimes just sort of seeing yourself as you would treat yourself as you would your mobile phone. You need times in the day where you need to plug yourself in to the wall to recharge for 10 minutes and just have a total shutdown. Close your eyes, put your headphones in and have a complete shutdown from everything. And that can help us. Just putting those tiny micro breaks in through the day can just refill the tank little and often. And I think often supporters can sort of plan, you know, one big thing per week, or they might go out for half a day or have a large chunk of time out for themselves on the weekend. Generally, it's much better to do little and often, so have something each day or something every other day rather than one big thing at the weekend, because then the pressure just builds up and up. And by the time you get to the weekend, you're ready to explode. What we want to do is have the stress, you know, being managed and being brought down little and often throughout the week. Okay. I do talk about cancer time with people, both supporters and patients, because the cancer headspace can feel quite dominating. So sometimes it's really helpful to sort of communicate and say, look, why don't we have cancer-free morning? You know, agree in advance and say, let's not talk about it for half a day and talk about other things. And that can just sort of foster that opportunity to just escape from thinking or talking about cancer. And putting a little bit of a boundary around. All right, so communication. Knowing what to say can be hard, knowing what to do can be hard. There is no right or wrong way of being a supporter, because everybody's different. So the person that you're caring for will have different needs to the next person, and our needs change on a daily basis. So I might come home from work and need a cup of tea. The next day I might come home from work and need a hug. The day after that, I might come home and actually say, I just need space right now. So our needs change all the time. So as a supporter, don't put pressure on yourself to mind read other people. Ask them, what is it you need? How can I support you? The onus is on them. The responsibility is on the person with cancer to let you know what they need. It's not up to you as supporters to guess. There's a lot of guessing games that go on, particularly with supporters that maybe don't know the person so well. They might guess what kind of food they need, or they might you know, come over all the time and think, oh, that person needs company, they're lonely, when actually they might just want space. So it's really helpful to have that transparent communication. So as a supporter, your responsibility is to ask, what is it you need? How can I help? The responsibility is then on the person with cancer to communicate what that is. And then you can then elicit feedback and say, was that helpful? You know, was that, you know, was it helpful for you to sit and talk? And you know, I just listened. I don't feel like I was very helpful, but was that helpful for you? And just that back and forth. Sometimes we don't need to talk either. We just need that non-verbal. Cancer patients can sometimes have that greater need for physical touch, that sense of feeling comforted, safe, soothed, loved can be greater. And sometimes the touch is important, just being there, holding their hand or the hand on the shoulder, or it might just be your presence. Sometimes people say, look, the best support I had during chemo wasn't verbal or talking. It was someone just coming with me to chemo and sitting there in the room, in the corner for 8 hours, and not really, we didn't talk much, but it meant a lot to me. Again, I talked about this a little bit before, but it's okay to share some of your own feelings. And, you know, talk with the person that you're caring for, because they might say, hey, I give you permission to talk to me. I can tolerate some of your feelings. I can handle it. You're not going to burden me. And if anything, sometimes they really appreciate it because it gives them permission to talk as well. And then finally, it's about having those boundaries, figuring out what can I do and what's beyond my capability, my resources right now. And that's about saying no. It's about saying yes to what you feel you can do. But if everything's too much, remembering around you, we want to build a whole heap of foundations underneath you as the supporter to hold you up, because you're going to need a team of people cheerleading you on if you are the primary supporter. Really important to think, who's in my team, who's in my crew that can support me emotionally, practically, and take on bits and pieces so I'm not doing it all. And that kind of just being mindful, if you are a key or a primary supporter, that you haven't got some of those superhero thoughts that can sometimes lead to feeling you're doing it all. It's recognizing that it's great to want to do it all, but if we try to, we can see a burnout happen quite fast. Okay. All right. So I'll just run through a few of these, and then we might have just a couple of minutes break, just because it's nice sometimes if you're sitting for long periods of time to get up and stretch, get a cup of tea. Practical ways to help. So having a roster for driving to appointments, meals, who's going to mow the lawns, who's going to pick up groceries, who's going to take the kids to school. It can be amazing to have some rosters set out and planning ahead so that you know how much is expected of you on a given day. So you're planning it all out, and that can be really helpful to give you some predictability. People will set up various ways of updating the wider family or colleagues or friends with email, text updates, but you can sometimes give that role to someone else. They can be the kind of spokesperson and do the updates and you know, field the calls. It doesn't have to be you. And organising visiting hours as well can be helpful. So these are some of the practical things. And I will just talk a little bit about support crew. Some of you might be familiar with this, some of you not. I'm a big fan. Support crew has recently become part of the Cancer Society. It's a platform where you can set up a free page, list all the things you need help with, and invite all your friends and family, and they pick and choose what they can do. It just helps it organize that support really clearly. It avoids those mind reading problems or miscommunication where you've got 17 people bringing a lasagna that you don't need. So it can be really helpful to just have it really clearly set out in one place, and then it's up to others what they pick and choose to do. So again, it is free. It can include people who are overseas. There's there's a part of this website where you can go to a store, and there's various things you can buy in the store as well, such as meals, buy my food bag. So anybody, even those supporters overseas, can be practically or emotionally supportive as well. The other thing that I like about this is that there is a communication chat page, so you can put all your communication and updates on there as well. So it's everything in one place. There's also a little button on there that you can tick receiving visitors or not receiving visitors, so people can go on and check how you're feeling on a given day. It's a lot of useful things, so I encourage you to have a look at it. And it's completely free. It's been set up by two people who were supporters effectively of someone with cancer, so really with you guys in mind. Okay, so we're about 40 minutes through. What I'm going to do is maybe we just take a really quick tea break, stretch break. So it's 10:40 now. Maybe if we come back in 3 minutes or so we just take a brief one and come back at 10:43. If you have any particular questions for me, we will have a bit of time at the end, so you can feel free to ask those in person or just send them to me in the chat box, and I will try to sort of talk through some of those questions that you have. So see you guys in just a few minutes. So we'll just get going. Thanks, Stanley. All right, I hope you've had a chance to get a tea or a stretch. So as I said, I was just talking a little bit about support crew. There's the website there that you can note down. to jump onto if that does interest you. Okay, so this is really just a little bit of a summary slide around sort of the key top strategies that we find really help supporters. The first one is obviously around being available to listen. And it can be scary to sit with big feelings that someone else is going through and having. But I think if you kind of allow space, hold the space for those feelings without putting any pressure on yourselves to do anything about it, fix it, make them feel all better. Let go of that kind of urge to jump in with a positive or make them feel better, because that can sometimes feel for that person with cancer a little bit invalidating if we jump in quickly with, yeah, but remember this, and yeah, but remember it's not all bad. Sometimes that person can feel like their feelings are not being acknowledged and validated. So listening and validating this, these are kind of some basic things which mental health professionals will have a lot of training in, but we can all do that listening, and that, I imagine that's really hard. That sounds really difficult. So letting go of that feeling of needing to say something that might make them feel all better, because that's not often what they need. They need someone to hear them and get them where they're at. They're not expecting you to make them feel all better. And sometimes our efforts to do that can make things difficult. Even though we know that comes from a good place, we want to cheer someone up. Sometimes they might not be in that place where they want to be cheered up. So it's just about listening, and it's about being there, being present, being approachable. And then if you're kind of feeling like, I don't really know how to help this person, I don't really know what they need, that's where we come in with that communication. That's where we can ask and say, hey, is this helpful? I don't feel like I'm I don't feel like I'm necessarily making anything better for you or making you feel better. It's hard. They might then give you some feedback that indicates otherwise. So coming back to that sort of checking in, how can I help you? What is it you need? Do you need me to be a listener? Do you need me to give you practical advice? Do you need a hug? Give those three options to people if they're struggling to identify what it is they need. You can say, hey, advice, listening, or do you just want a hug? Or do you just want to be distracted? And throw a few things out there for them. Helping out where you can. So of course, most of you as supporters are probably doing an amazing job of being there for that person, helping out where you can, but also recognizing, is this something that I need to do, or is it something that maybe somebody else could do sometimes? Or could I delegate some of these things to others at times? Go with them to appointments or offer, but at the same time respect their need for space. I haven't talked too much about this, but communication can be, sometimes those problems can occur when one person doesn't want to talk about things and the other one does. I think as a supporter, you might want to talk a lot about your fears or a lot about planning ahead, or it might be the other way around. And the key thing is respecting that just because somebody has been diagnosed with cancer is not going to radically all of a sudden change their coping style with difficult things in life. They'll cope in the same way they've always coped with things. And if they're not generally a talker, they cope with doing other things. That's okay. And I think a large challenge for supporters and patients is sometimes about that issue, about respecting you have your own styles of coping, and sometimes those styles clash. Sometimes there is a difference with how far along that sort of path to acceptance you are in comparison to someone else. So some people might be on the surface very accepting and very open and kind of going with the flow. And then there's this other person that's sort of back here saying, I'm not coping. I'm really struggling. I'm in, not necessarily denial, but I'm really, I'm not ready to talk about this stuff. Yeah, so you can find people move along that path to coming to terms at different speeds. Or it might be one person seems really positive and is just wanting to make the most of time, or embrace a lot of changes, and the other person saying, no, I just need normality. I want things to be the same. I don't want change because that's threatening to me. So how people perceive change can be quite different in relationships as well. So I think, again, coming back to respecting need for space, it's okay if people want time by themselves. It's okay to respect that. We can't force someone to be with us or talk to us. It's about when they're ready. We've talked a bit about cancer-free time. So that can be really helpful. It's kind of like containing your mind a little bit and saying, I'm going to have, Saturday morning off from cancer, from thinking about cancer. I'm not going to read the paper. I'm not going to do things which trigger thoughts. I'm going to plan an activity which will help me disengage from cancer, that's going to help me get into the flow and the moment and things which give me joy and pleasure, or connect to who I am and what matters to me. So really important to keep those things in regularly anyway, but it can be helpful to explicitly state with those around you, hey, I don't want to talk about it this morning. I want a break from it. And that's a good strategy. It's helpful to have this distraction with cancer. It's not avoidance. It's about having some healthy distraction and containing how much your mind is preoccupied with thinking about cancer. Ask for help when you need it, a really big one. Remembering who is in my team, who can I add into my team, who can I, have joy in my team, who supports me if you are the primary supporter. And number 10, but I think it should be at the top, is number 1, take care of yourself, because none of this other stuff is possible if you're running on empty. So really, really important. Everybody knows it, but I just like to hammer the point home that it is so crucial. And particularly around allowing yourself, time to meet your needs, because when a supporter is neglecting their own needs, what we see is a natural build-up of resentment. And that resentment can be quite corrosive to the relationship. It can really affect your communication with that person that you love and caring for. If we can start to feel resentment or that feeling of bitterness, that, what's important to me or what I need is getting pushed aside. So take back control of that. Talk with professionals, talk with those in your support team about how can I bring a little bit more of self-care back for me in life. How do I do this? Don't fully have to do that problem solving on your own if it feels hard to find the time. I do acknowledge lockdown is making it hard for people to get out to the gym, go for a swim, do what they need to do. So just be really kind to yourselves, and it's just adapting with what can I do that gives me some form of escape right now and helps me unwind. Okay, so that is the final slide for today. We'll do a brief relaxation exercise, and then afterwards there's a couple more things to run through, and then there'll be some time for questions if you have it. Okay. So I really encourage you to take part in this if you can. It's not compulsory, but it's just a very brief guided relaxation, which hopefully you'll enjoy and help you kind of leave feeling a little bit lighter at the end of this talk, because some of the things I talk about can bring up feelings. So if you can, just closing your eyes down, getting as comfortable as you can wherever you are at home. And I'd like you to just take a slow breath in through the nose. Take your full attention to following that breath all the way down into your lungs. And then slowly breathing out through your nose or mouth. See if you can make that out breath long. The next time you take a breath in, I want you to scan your body for any parts that are holding a lot of tension. We are so used to holding tension in different bits of our bodies that we can do it all day. And then at the end of the day, we realize our shoulders are up by our ears. So scan your body through, and with your out breath, see if you can let some of that tension melt away. Any of you that know a little bit about abdominal breathing will know that using our tummy to draw in the breath will help trigger off that calm mechanism in our body through the vagus nerve and help us to calm our mind. Let go of breathing with the shoulders, the chest, and breathe with your belly. Now I'd like you to begin to imagine a place which can be real or imaginary. It can be anything you like. This place is peaceful, calm, and when you're here, you feel completely at ease, safe and secure. Spend a little bit of time looking around this place. Is it outdoors or indoors? Is it small or large? Notice the colors and the shapes around you. What's the weather doing in your place? Is it sunny and warm? Is it cool? Is there water around you? Or any animals, birds? If you have a favorite pet or animal, you can always bring that into your place with you. Or you can bring somebody in with you. Or you can prefer to be alone. Now tune into any sounds that you can hear in this place around you. Take a bit of time to really bring those to mind and imagine that you're really tuning into those and paying attention to perhaps any water sounds, wind, bird song. Might be a roaring fire for some of you. It might be the sound of somebody you love laughing. And now take another slow breath in through your nose, using your tummy muscles. And as you let that breath out slowly, just bring to mind any feelings of touch, any physical sensations you can feel in this place. For example, the breeze on your skin, the grass on your toes. the surface beneath which you might be standing or lying on, sitting. Because this is your mind, it's your imagination, you can be doing whatever you like in this place. You might be floating. And really tune into those physical feelings. So this place is here, you've created it in your mind. It's always there for you whenever you need it. Whenever you need that mental vacation, you need 5 minutes in the day to stop and shut down, take yourself off to this place. You can always add some music in if you want, if that helps you to get there. You can file this away in your memory, and it's a very useful strategy to begin to practice. Some of us find it hard to visualize. About 20% of us can find this a bit tricky, but most of us don't need any guiding to visualize a place that they feel safe in and calm. You can give it a name. The forest or the beach or whatever it is. It might be somewhere completely separate from this planet. It might be in the universe somewhere. It's whatever you want it to be, and it's very, very powerful when we begin to use our imagination, and the use of imagery main lines right through to our physiology and our emotional central nervous system and our emotions. So using that power of visualization is very, very effective for helping us to stay calm. There's a lot more of these types of exercises on our website. You'll find that we have a page with a number of tracks, relaxation and mindfulness tracks, which you can explore. So just really gradually opening your eyes if you haven't already. Sometimes it'd be nice to just have a stretch, just kind of thinking, well, what does my body need right now? Does it need a shoulder shrug, or do I need to give myself a hug? Sometimes we might need to shake ourselves awake again. Okay, so this is something you can do anywhere, anytime. Practice will make it more and more powerful. Okay, so just a couple of other things to run through. For those of you who don't know too much about the Cancer Society, we have a nursing service. This is for all divisions around the country. You can have access to cancer nurse specialists who support you in the community through treatment. We also have a great team of trained oncology nurses at the end of the 0800 cancer number. So any cancer, any question, they are a great source of information, first port of call. If you've just been diagnosed and you don't know what support's out there, it can be really great. Our volunteering service, they're amazing, and they do a lot of different things to support cancer patients, but mainly they provide driving to appointments. And then finally, we have counselling and psychology support available to everybody across the country, including supporters. That looks a little bit different in each part of New Zealand. So any questions about any of these, just give the 0800 cancer number a call and they can explain what's available in your area. For those of you who are living in Tamaki Makaurau, here's our wonderful team of psychologists based in Domain Lodge, but we're continuing to work remotely at the moment. We're available to support anyone over 18 and their support people, and we do have interpreters available as well. Our group program for people post-cancer treatment runs throughout the year. It will be restarting at level 1, as well as the talks that we do in the house. So again, looking at what's available in my area, call the 0800 number, it's the easiest, or hop on the website. We will be doing these webinars going forward all the way through level 4, 3 and 2. There is also, I've just put a picture of the guy who runs Yoga Fire in Northland. He is a fireman and he has a great series of yoga for cancer patients. So have a look at his website, that's all free. And how to contact us if you're needing support in your area. You can self-refer through our website, it's really easy, or through the 0800 cancer number. We're not an urgent response service, so if you need someone in the middle of the night, you're really struggling emotionally and you need to talk, those 1737 numbers are really good. They have trained counsellors at the end who can support you any time of the day. And next time we will be giving a talk on the challenges of moving on with life after cancer treatment. Significant challenges for many. So finding a new normal is a good one for anyone who has completed active treatment, radiotherapy, chemo, had surgery, and then got no more active treatment coming up. So if you're looking to register for that, that's in 2 weeks' time at 10. And look forward to seeing you then if you want to join. So we've got a little bit of time. If anyone has any questions for me, I'll just hang around. Obviously turn your microphone on so I can hear you. And I'll just hang around for a little while in case anybody does want to ask anything.